If you are anything like me, which, if you're watching this video, you unfortunately are, you all had that show that you were too embarrassed to tell anyone you watched. Was it Sailor Moon? The Tweenies? Well, for me, it was a little show you may have heard of called LazyTown. LazyTown is a children's TV show from Iceland that was greenlit by Nickelodeon in 2004. The show follows Stephanie, who has recently moved into town so she can go live with her uncle, who just so happens to be the mayor. Alongside Stephanie, we are introduced to a whole cast of characters such as Ziggy, a superhero lover with a craving for sweets, Pixel, a socially awkward tech expert, Trixie, the town troublemaker, Bessie Busybody, the mayor's secretary and secret lover, and Stingy, a snotty little Tory. I feel like I'm forgetting someone. Oh yeah, of course! Who could forget possibly the most iconic character from the entire series, who's actually played by the series curator himself, Magnus Scheving. He is the mighty hero and sworn protector of LazyTown. He is none other than Sporticus. Oh shit! Me. He is fast. At its core, the show has one motive: fitness. Fitting this dick in your mouth! But no, the show does strive on motivating young kids into eating healthier and engaging in physical activity, which was in part put together to stop the rise in childhood obesity. I mean, it didn't work for me, but that's not to say that it didn't work for other kids. I always thought the show was extremely bizarre, but when you think about it, that's what it needs to be. If you want kids to actually pay attention, or maybe even copy along with the characters, you have to break the mold and show them something that they don't usually see. Magnus actually referred to the show as a blend between Moulin Rouge, Jackie Chan, James Bond, and Sesame Street, which to me sounds a bit weird for a kid's show, but it works. LazyTown didn't begin as a surreal children's TV show. It actually began as something far stranger. Far stranger. And to talk about that, we're gonna have to go back, way back, to a time where the only thing you were worried about your kids catching were late night nudges on MSN. The 1990s.
As with sonar, the big problem with detection is interpreting the returning signals.
In 1992, Icelandic-born Magnus Scheving had become a Nordic national prodigy. By this point, he had become the Icelandic men's individual champion in aerobic gymnastics, before going on to become the Scandinavian champion the next year, and then two-time European champion the year after that. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I know so much about Icelandic aerobics? Well, I like to consider myself a connoisseur of the physical arts, meaning that I keep myself well versed in historical events, and also due to Scheving's sudden spike in notoriety, multiple media sources were paying up. And soon enough, Magnus was booked on chat shows and would eventually begin a career as an avid motivational speaker. During this business venture, something clicked for Magnus. He had come to the realization that out of the handful of public speakers that preach about healthy diets and proactive lifestyles, there were no role models that were actively dedicated to motivating kids. This had become a huge issue in Iceland, as the number of child obesity cases had begun to drastically increase. So, in 1995, Magnus took matters into his own hands with the release of his first children's book, Afran Latabai, or roughly translated as Go Go LazyTown. Now, there isn't anything too flashy or bizarre about the book. In fact, it's actually quite charming. The illustrations and characters are very exaggerated and different. It kind of reminds me of the old Asterix comics, or even some of the old Smurfs comics. And I don't just mean that because Sporticus is supposed to be an elf. And no, I'm not bullshitting you. This is supposed to be an elf. Anyway, the book was adapted into a stage play the next year and was eventually recorded and released on home video. And this is where the fun really begins. show starts off with the mayor of LazyTown, and boy is he chunky. He sings a little song about how all the residents of LazyTown never leave their houses, leaving the streets empty and dull. To be honest, I kinda feel for him. It reminds me of being young again during the early 2000s, being forced to play outside while all my school friends were sat in playing on their Xboxes and PlayStations, while I'm sat on the street corner playing Kirby. A little glimmer of hope shines through though, as the mayor receives a letter exclaiming that a sports competition will be held in LazyTown, which is a shame because no one wants to join in. First, we are introduced to Bessie Busybody, and yeesh, she's seen better days, man. You know what, love? I'll understand if you want to stay in the house. I won't blame you. There's nothing really relevant about Bessie in this other than the fact that she smokes, and she's a bit of a nutcase. So as we move on, the play constantly tells us about the antisocial behaviour of the youth of LazyTown. Ever since they've been glued to their televisions, all the children of LazyTown have been disrespectful and can't hold a conversation. Which personally, I don't think that falls on watching television. I think that falls on every conversation you have with the kids of LazyTown are all centered about how you hate the kids of LazyTown.
Úlingarnir eru svo úttalslitlir að þeir geta einu sinni labbað út í búð eða haldið á eigin skólatösku. Svo geta þeir ekki einu sinni haldið upp í samræðum við fullorðið fólk.
I mean, the Gallaghers f***ing hate each other, and I'm sure they break the ice sometimes by having conversations about the weather or Damien Albarn or something. Also, they say all the kids are lazy, but that kid is blatantly full of energy. She makes the mayor look like an absolute gobshite. A bit later, we're introduced to Pixel, who to my understanding is just an Icelandic version of Arwen from The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody.
Já.
En þá missi ég af stundin okkar og morgunsjónvarpinu og prúðuleikurum og auglýsingu sem á að fara að sýna núna, ég má ekki vera að þessu bless.
Now hold on. This is the second mentioning of infomercials. They do know that people skip those things, right? No one likes them. Or maybe it's supposed to be ironic, but I can't really tell because there isn't a laughing track to reinforce it. I'm a big Bang Theory fan, you see, and I can't really process a joke unless Sheldon's has been.
Bazinga!
Alright, so we fast forward to, whoa, slow down there, cowboy, what the hell's going on here? The editing is so bizarre. It's like you took the top searches from Word Art and then just threw them into Mario Paint. Eventually, the mayor calls all the residents of LazyTown together and orders them to take place in the sports competition. To which they say, nah, you know. At this point, you kind of just feel bad for him. It feels less like a musical and more like an opera. It's this tragic tale of a man's constant denial of holy shit! Well, here he is, the spin-kicking genie himself. He hears the mayor's cries for help, and before you can say childhood trauma, he's off on the prowl, converting the residents of LazyTown John Wick style. He starts off with Ziggy, but to be honest, you'd be lying if you didn't think that a fat man, dressed like Superman, lying in bed and singing about sweets, wasn't peak performance.
Hvernig vöðvarnir?
Jesus, Sporkus, you sure you shouldn't be wearing purple? We meet Jive, who's actually the first character who didn't make it to the television series. But to be honest, that's probably because his only trait is that he's lanky and tired from eating processed foods. Another character who didn't make it to the show would be Penny Pastella, which to be honest, she's just straight up a gold digger. Hold on, who do you get your financial advice from? Wesley Snipes. We then meet Stephanie Splits, and her only personality is that she's really stiff, which kinda makes her second name a bit redundant. We meet Trixie, the town arsehole, and who can forget Stingy? He's basically just that kid who really looked up to Ben Shapiro when you were in high school. Honestly, I can't really go that deep into this, as the story just kinda rambles, but that's just because it's essentially just an overly stretched PSA. Exercise, don't watch too much television, Make sure you eat the right foods. Always stretch before you exercise. Be sensible with your money. Don't be a stingy little But, to be fair, that's always been the concept of LazyTown. To entertain children while educating them at the same time. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And by tree, I mean Sporticus. And by apple, I mean apple. So let's just quickly summarise the rest of the story. After Sporticus convinces the remainder of the town to compete, the sports competition starts to go underway. However, LazyTown's rivals, Big Town, are not really enthused by their sudden eagerness to compete, leading them to try and steal the first place trophy. Which you can't really technically call stealing, because it was left out in the street. I mean, I know they were dressed like robbers, but that's besides the point. Either way, they fail miserably, and they compete in the competition the next day, and fail miserably again. And they all lived happily ever after, and no one in LazyTown was ever lazy again. Until they were. Ho 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 people. Thanks for watching the first part of what's going to be a 3-part series about LazyTown. The second part should be out on New Year's, and the third part should be out around the first sort of month of 2021, around that time. While you're still here, I'd like to give a shout out to Gumbumby, who actually drew all my character art and my backgrounds, and just generally just a real goober, you know what I mean? Just a real goober. I'd also like to give a shout out to Noriak22, who's just brought out his new video on Monster Hunter, so give that one a quick watch if you'd want to. I mean, do give it a watch, please. I'd also like to just say thanks again for watching, just because it's my first time doing this sort of YouTube thing, and it really helps out a lot, just kind of people just spreading it and saying feedback and stuff like that. It just really helps me make my videos a lot better, and that's all I really want to do, is just make them better and better until eventually they are the peak of better, whatever that will be. Either way, I'm rambling. Thanks for watching it, and hopefully the next one will be out next week. Bye.